All right, thanks for joining us, everybody. We are here to talk this afternoon about first-party signals, identity resolution, and artificial intelligence. So why are we focusing on those, or why are we emphasizing those themes, as opposed to, say, the related topic of signal loss, signal deprecation? I would argue it's because those are stories that have largely been written already. Cookie deprecation began in 2017. That feels like a lifetime ago. Yeah. App tracking transparency is 4 years old now, I think, thereabouts. I don't think the IDFA is coming back anytime soon. But the argument can be made, and we will make the argument today. Not only are there alternatives to those identifiers, those signals that we have relied on in the past, that they're really superior alternatives. We all know, everybody in this room I think probably has experience with it, the major platforms are prioritizing first-party signals in their own environments, and so it is really incumbent upon all of us, if we want to play effectively, if we want to win essentially on their turf, so to speak, we need to be able to speak that language and to speak it fluently. And so the thesis today, I think our shared thesis, is that in a world of AI, a world with AI, and a world enabled by AI, that a first-party data strategy, fidelity of signal, trust and governance of those signals, and crucially, the connectedness of that data to the places where our customers are and where our future customers are, is really more important than ever. All right, let's just jump into it. Our first one to tackle, Mike. First-party data doesn't scale. I think this is reflective of an experience that probably a lot of you in this room have had, that you take a seed audience, you push it into some sort of a platform, and you look at your match rate, or you look at the size of your lookalike audience, and you say, well, there's not a lot of there, right? And so, this is redolent of some reality, right? An experience that a lot of people have had. I think we will argue that these problems really are soluble. I will say on our side, on the Tinuiti side, we have thought about this in both the measurement and the activation and the strategy context. On the measurement side, we really do see both first-party data, but particularly resolved identity. Right, so our ability to take those first-party signals and concretize them into the notion of an individual, a household, things like this, as foundational and really fundamental to our measurement strategies. And this has really been infused through everything that we do, or virtually everything that we do, in our measurement systems. We're going to talk about this in some more depth in just a couple of minutes. And then secondly, on the activation side, this is where we have found that we're in a really symbiotic moment, right? That as a lot of you in this room, we at Tinuiti and publishers, the large publishers themselves, have made a really significant investment in their graphs and in their first-party audiences over the last number of years, right? And so if you, as a brand, if you have made an effort, if you've invested in collecting first-party data, in curating it, in attaching valuable signals to it, if you're working with a publisher, or if the publisher ecosystem hasn't made similar investments, there's very limited utility, right? Fortunately, that is not the world that we are living in. Every scaled publisher that we work with over the last number of years has invested really heavily in those publisher side graphs and their ability to essentially converse with first-party signals. So again, I think we are in a moment of some advantageous symbiosis. And then finally, we have found on the Tinuiti side, through our partnership with TU, that our ability to express ourselves, I'll say, in a single currency and single syndicate out to multiple platforms has been a major efficiency win, not only for us, but most importantly, of course, for our clients. Yep. Mike, you're obviously at the nerve center of a lot of this. How do you see this from where you sit?
So, one, Sean, thank you for having me, and thank you to the Tinuiti team for setting up this awesome event. I think a few things that we're focused on really to help brands ultimately get the most out of the data assets that they've been out and to ultimately grow their business. Number one, like you said, there's been a lot of disruption within the data landscape, and by and large, we hold the position that unless you're staying at a DoubleTree, you really shouldn't be caring about cookies anymore, right? Like the world has moved on. It's just not as relevant as anyone probably thinks at this point. The second is, given all the data disruption, we have a call to action now. The industry has a call to action that we haven't had in a really long time, and that is with AI. Like I was told they wouldn't give me a microphone unless I said AI, so check. I get to keep my microphone. And we've talked a lot throughout the day around the value and the use cases that you can plug AI into and on top of. We haven't talked as much about what fuels that, and that is data, right? And so as of right now, the importance, the value of AI is very much predicated on having connected and highly trusted data. And that's where we see identity coming in, especially relevant in today's landscape. To talk through the framework that we have up on the screen, it really comes down to two simple dynamics. Where can you really understand your audiences, whether it's first or a prospecting type audience? How do you build a holistic 360-degree view of who they are and how you want to engage them? And there's ways to do that with a high degree of detail and lower degree of detail, depending on where you want to execute across the ecosystem. At the same time, there's conversion signal. I think Tinuiti is at the forefront of really focusing on measurement and outcomes-based measurement to prove the efficacy of all of the media investments that are going on across their plans. And so at the end of the day, if you have very strong signal on who you're targeting, and you have very strong deterministic signal around who's being exposed and then what actions are being taken, all connected back to ultimately the first-party data of that brand, that's where growth happens. Like that's where the magic happens. And I think just broadly speaking, we're very focused on leveraging identity and the connected nature of being able to bring that data together to make that growth engine quadrant as big and as holistic as we physically can.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Measurement is broken. Now, less than perfect measurement is my form of job security. So everybody take this with a grain of salt. Look, obviously, we all think about this. We all talk about these topics every day. There's no doubt that certain measurement strategies are much less viable than they were 10 years ago, even completely non-viable. I would say at the same time, and the people in this room are the people who make this happen. Marketing measurement has really never been more sophisticated than it is today, along a lot of important dimensions. The way we think about this at Tinuiti is as three pillars or like a tripod, right? I don't think there is a single answer or a silver bullet to measurement, how you do measurement. First, and I would say not most importantly, but very importantly, is deterministic measurement, right? Where this is actually possible, where it is feasible, which is not everywhere, it is really worth its weight in gold, right? There are so many advantages to high-quality deterministic measurement protocols. I'll just highlight quickly precision, right? The level of precision you can get in terms of placements and devices and creatives and so on and so forth, but crucially speed. Deterministic measurement protocols allow you to understand performance in something close to real time and really drive a speedboat as opposed to driving a, what do you call it, an aircraft carrier, something like this, cruise ship, there you go. And adaptability, like we all know how crucial adaptability is. If it is taking you weeks, months, quarters to really move in response to performance signals, you're wasting resources that whole time, right? That is obviously something that we want to avoid. Second, experimental design and causal inference. Deterministic measurement protocols are great. They don't solve every problem. One problem that they don't really solve is genuine issues or questions, I should say, around causation. What is the true causal treatment effect of some sort of an intervention? Typically some form of, media or targeting, activation, whatever it might be. These pair together very nicely. And in both, I'm remiss in not mentioning, in both the deterministic measurement context and in the experimental context, identity resolution is incredibly useful, right? So in the deterministic case, being able to know who was exposed and who converted, which sounds simple, but is just non-trivial in practice, you are at such an advantage, right, if you have strong identity resolution on both sides of that equation. And then similarly, in an experimental context, being able to run something like a randomized controlled trial with the same issues at play, who was treated and then who responded, so that we can actually understand the treatment effect, is really vital. And then finally, there are the higher level econometric protocols, marketing mix modeling, our GeoMMM product. A bunch of you in this room are familiar with that. I would just point out very quickly here, identity resolution and user-level data is not irrelevant in this context. So even when a model like this is not going to be featurized at the user level, things like informative priors, right, that are used to calibrate and to inform these kinds of models are themselves dependent on these experimental techniques, which are in turn dependent on identity resolution. So from where we see the world, again, really all are necessary. None of them individually are easy, but they're all achievable. And a marketing team, a brand, a CMO that can do all three well can really invest in growth with confidence.
Yep. Yeah, I think first and foremost, we tend to think of two core use cases for measurement at large. Number one is external to the marketing organization, which usually means anyone from the finance team here. Like those are the conversations with the CFOs and really advocating for external to marketing, the value that marketing and those investments drive to the business. Like how are we driving growth at the end of the day? And with that, you need a concert of tools to be able to provide those results and report back the degrees at which marketing can drive the business with credibility and with accuracy, which ultimately facilitate those finance level conversations. That's kind of part one, and I would argue really important, if not most important. Separate to that is how marketing organizations leverage measurement within their own walls, and that is really to help build a more agile, what's working, not working, how do I optimize and how do I drive towards my goals view of performance. And so I would echo everything that Sean said. You need a concert of tools. If it was simpler, trust me, we would have found a simpler way to do it. But it really is leverage the right tool for the right job, and these three are the golden triangle, if you will, of capabilities that ultimately will represent the proper impact of marketing. And I think to the degree that identity stitches across all three, I think, again, everything you said is spot on. I would also add, we're increasingly seeing brands focus on breaking out their first-party data or their outcomes, even within the econometric modeling, tied to segmentation that's important to them, right? Something simple as new versus existing activity. Breaking your MMM model to have things like value tiers, right? There's lots of different ways that you can start to craft measurement as a conjunction of your strategy, right? Said simply, like ROI and efficiency is not a strategy, right? And that's, we'll get into a little bit of the next myth, but like AI is not going to take marketer jobs because AI does not define a strategy. It can help articulate what's working or not working. It can help automate things that we don't want to do, but ultimately it is people in this room that are ultimately going to determine, you know, what should marketing be doing? What role does it have to play? Does it have to play in moving our business forward?
All right, number three, AI replaces the marketer. Nervous laughter. You know, I think my take here is not going to surprise anybody. You know, we talked about this morning, right? Like we have all in our lives lived through, you know, wave after wave after wave of automation, who today is working materially less than they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? Like it just is not the pattern. You know, my expectation certainly is over the next 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be a continuation of the same trends, right? It's simply an evolution of the kinds of work that we do. You know, already today, there are, you know, we certainly at Tinuiti, and I'm sure others in this room, you know, we're not investing huge amounts of time in managing row after row after row of line items with their own targeting and their own budget allocations and their own, you know, strategies, right? Like we have campaign automation tools that are handling a lot of that. Our role has moved essentially higher up the stack, right? We are conductors of these tools and technologies. And really, again, it moves the role that we play in the task, right? And I do see, you know, our role and the role of marketers on the brand side as really about what is it that you want as a marketer and as a business, right? And particularly, this gets to the idea of value expression. You know, as somebody who's spent a number of years working with optimization algorithms, I can tell you how sensitive they are to exactly what you tell it you want, right? You don't just say, we want good outcomes. You have to say, we want revenue, we want new users, we want margin, we want profitability, right? And so our jobs are becoming every day a little bit more understanding value expression into these very powerful tools that can actually go find new users for us and really go drive growth and new business for us. And this is what brings us back to the point where in a world where we have these extremely powerful tools at our disposal, it becomes ever more important that we give them high quality ingredients and we point them in exactly the right direction.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo the last statement, which is like ROI and efficiency is not a strategy, right? They help course correct and they are inputs into how you ultimately are investing and where you're choosing to put the next dollar, but it should be tied to a strategy that you're using your measurement and data to course correct against. Even something as simple as a lookalike model, let's just take an example of like a common mistake would be to take all of your conversions, right? We had 100 conversions yesterday. Let's take that entire pool, build a lookalike model, audience extension, and go after more folks like that. That's probably better than nothing, but what you should be looking at is breaking out those 100 converters into different populations who are more meaningful for your brand than others. Where might you have a high churn rate from people coming on that for whatever reason doesn't fit and drive ultimately the profitability for your brand that they should. And the power of both the lookalike modeling and the AI-driven campaign optimizations, which we're seeing increasingly adopted by major platforms, is that they can find exactly what you're looking for, right? They will go and do it. They will pull the levers. As marketers, we have to get very smart at telling it what to look for, right? It's the same thing as learning how to prompt ChatGPT. Highly powerful if you know how to prompt it, kind of less so if you don't. And really where we see first-party data, identity, measurement really coming together is to be able to distill out that signal and to give these platforms both lookalike modeling on the targeting side or, let's call it conversion API for auto campaign optimizations, more lower funnel, the signal that is ultimately strategic for your business.
All right, number 4, all conversions are equal. This may sound to some of you in the audience like a bit of a straw man. If we went and polled, 50 of you and said, are all conversions created equal? I think most people would say, well, no, of course not.
Well, show of hands. Who thinks all conversions are treated equal or should be treated equal?
There we go.
But here's the thing, like the algorithms do, right? Think about that. Like when you are optimizing, the signal that you put in, they are by and large, starting to change now, but by and large, they are treating all of those equal, right? So I think it ties perfectly back to the point we were just talking about, which is part of our job as a marketer is shifting, right? We're not necessarily pushing all the levers as often or as much as we were before. AI is taking care of that, but we're steering the ship, right? We have to give the signal that everything is optimizing towards, and that's where this, straw man fallacy of like we all know that to be true, but how many of you are taking the steps to make sure that the conversions that all of this entire AI machinery is being trained off of? Does it know the same thing? Like it doesn't, how do we then essentially teach it to know what we already know?
Yeah, indeed. And if we look empirically how campaigns are actually being run, a very significant fraction of them are really optimizing for volume, right? Volume of conversions, volume of new users. There is a huge amount of opportunity that we see, in front of us and really ultimately our clients in value-based bidding, right?
Yep.
So whether it is, going from number of conversions to revenue from conversions, from revenue to profitability, the things that really matter to a business, the things that drive growth. If we want to do that, though, we of course need the data foundations to be able to do that. We need to be able to record and to express those, whether it be, again, revenue, profit, margin, whatever it is, we need to be able to express and communicate those signals at programmatic speed so that these really powerful tools and platforms can understand them and can go and take advantage of them. So we have to make an intentional choice there. So finally, who's really in control? I think the answer is we are, right? Everybody in this room, but we have to choose to do it, right? If we say we're just going to use off-the-shelf ingredients, the identifiers that come directly from the platforms, and identifiers that come from devices, things like this, and off-the-shelf tools, right? Naive campaign automation, things like that, then we're not really in control, right? We are at the whim of platforms, device manufacturers, OEMs, whatever it might be. We take what they give us, right? Whereas if we pursue the kind of strategy that we have talked about today, I think we can really put ourselves in the driver's seat. We can put ourselves in that upper right quadrant.
Yeah, completely. I think to say it a little bit of a different way, I think control looks different now and is increasingly looking different than it has in the past. Generally speaking, people on these teams, on our teams, are less hands-on, pushing the buttons, allocating dollars every day, every minute, and they are more steering and guiding the algorithms that are in charge of that by essentially everything that we've done today, right? And that comes down to connecting your data, having a strong view of your first-party conversions, understanding what's ultimately driving value for your business, and then using that to signal back to all of the different wonderful AI algorithms that are out there.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I think that's all of our time. Mike, thanks so much.
No, thanks for having us.
And thank you all.